With Cardano staking rewards unfortunately on the decline, there's been a brand new governance proposal recently submitted to redirect some of the core funds that would be going into the Cardano treasury back over into ADA delegators and stake pool operators. Now we're going to break down all the details about this brand new proposal, and then we're also going to talk a little bit more about how we can re-engage users to jump on and actually use the Cardano network. What's up, it gang? Welcome into Dapp Central, your home for everything blockchain and crypto. I'm your host here, Fareed, and with governance officially underway, the Cardano Constitution being ratified, we're now beginning to see the early stage of community-led governance. And today, we're talking about a brand new protocol parameter change request, which was just submitted on-chain to reduce the treasury tax for Cardano from 20% down to 10%, which will therefore increase the staking rewards that ADA holders receive when delegating to a stake pool. Now, before we go any further in terms of breaking down the Cardano monetary policy and exactly what some of the benefits of this particular proposal are, if it's your first time stopping by the channel, my goal is to help you find your footing within the Cardano and Bitcoin ecosystems. If you appreciate content just like this, I would appreciate you if you could smash that thumbs up on the way in. If you want more, consider subscribing to the channel. And if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to leave a comment down below. Now, if you want to extend your support for the channel even further, consider delegating with either of the two Dapp Central stake pools, which both share the stake pool ticker DAPP. So without any further ado, what we're going to break down is a brand new proposal that was just submitted, again, on chain for the decreasing of the current Cardano treasury tax from 20% down to 10%. And what I want to really do is just break down the monetary policy and then dive into some of the core benefits, which of course include the fact that Cardano staking rewards will increase as a result of decreasing the amount of money that we're pouring into the Cardano treasury, which, if you aren't aware, is currently valued at 1.68 billion ADA, or roughly $1.2 billion US. Of course, keep in mind that that number fluctuates given the price action of Cardano. So first things first, let's talk a little bit about the Cardano monetary policy. I'll leave the link to this particular document down below, but this is coming from the official Cardano.org docs section. So in terms of the monetary policy, they aim to address two separate issues. Number one, they have to make sure that the Cardano network offers rewards to people who participate in the network, aka Cardano stake pool operators. Number two, there needs to be some sort of mechanism to actually fund the Cardano treasury, which is then used to make changes or to go towards grants and different programs, for example, like Project Catalyst, to keep innovation going on in the ecosystem. So again, they have to support the security providers or the SPOs and then provide some sort of funding mechanism, which is the treasury. Now, how are SPOs actually rewarded? Well, it states here that the expansion and future improvement of the Cardano blockchain will be greatly influenced by its community, who now needs to be incentivized through rewards to participate in Cardano's development. Now, staking rewards for delegators and stake pool operators, or SPOs, comes from two separate sources. The first is transaction fees, where every single transaction that takes place on the Cardano network has a fixed percentage that is going back towards the treasury. And then there's also monetary expansion, or the Cardano reserves, which I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into in just a moment. But it states here that a certain percentage, which in this case is 20% of the pot, which includes the monetary expansion or the Cardano reserves and any of the transaction fees that were collected in a given epoch, all goes back towards the treasury. Now, in closing, before we move on any further here, I want to highlight two more things. where it states that the Treasury's goal is to provision the funds to develop Cardano activities through a voting process, which of course we now have SIP number 1694 in place and governance officially online. This necessitates a process whereby funds are regularly sent to the Treasury to ensure that funds are always available. Now, they talk about the calculations for two of those variables, that P variable as well as that T variable. And the biggest thing to take away here is that it states, in terms of the T variable, following discussions, deliberations, and projections, the value was arbitrarily, set to a fixed rate of 20%. Now, this was set a long time ago, which is why now there's been this proposal, which I'm going to dive into in just a moment, which is aiming to reduce that amount and to actually only send 10% of the reserve and transaction fees collected every epoch back to the Treasury, and then actually sending 90% of that amount over into stake pool rewards or into operator rewards and delegator rewards. Now, as we get ready to wind things down here in terms of the monetary expansion, it's important for me to break down one last thing. So here we've got the initial distribution of ADA as it was done at Genesis, where we have the Cardano Foundation, IOG, and Emergo taking up roughly around 12 to 13%. We then have the public sale taking 57%. And then we have the Cardano reserves getting an allocation of roughly 31%. And that was roughly around 13.8 billion ADA. Now, keep in mind that the reserves is set aside in every single epoch or every single 5 days. A portion of that goes into this quote unquote virtual pot, which also includes transaction fees. And then the aggregate of that, 20% goes towards the Treasury, and then 80% is distributed to stakers and SPOs. So if I scroll down here, it states that the rate of monetary expansion is set by that P parameter, which we just discussed, which is roughly 0.03%. And if you take a look at that and extrapolate that over the year, that actually comes out to an inflation yearly of roughly 2%. Now, the more people use the Cardano network or the Cardano blockchain, the more transaction fees are collected, meaning the more goes back into stakers or to stakers. Now, as it currently stands, the majority of Cardano staking rewards are coming straight from the reserves. But over time, as the reserves are depleted, we're going to begin to rely more on the transaction fees as opposed to the reserves. Now, here we've got a nice diagram breaking everything down where it states that the T parameter defines how much in terms of a percent of the quote unquote virtual pot will be sent to the Treasury and how much will be left for staking rewards, where that T parameter is currently set to 20%, meaning that 80% will be left for staking rewards. So here in this diagram, let me open this up on a separate screen here very briefly. We have the reserves, right? Which again, that's that 14 or so billion ADA. There's going to be a set amount every epoch, which is going to go into this quote unquote virtual pot. And then we've got the transaction fees, which will fluctuate depending on network activity every epoch, which also goes into this virtual pot. Now, out of this virtual pot, we have the 80%, which goes over to staking rewards here at the very bottom. And then we've got 20% going towards the Cardano Treasury. So now that we better understand how the Cardano Treasury works and how it's currently being funded, let's dive a little bit deeper into the current standing of the Treasury, and then we're going to talk about the recent proposal. As always, if you guys appreciate this content, please smash that thumbs up. I do my best to try to bring as much educational content here in the ecosystem, and that's by far one of the easiest ways to support me here as a content creator. So looking at the Treasury, again, we have 1.68 billion ADA worth $1.2 billion. And we can see that epoch over epoch, the reserves is slowly depleting right now with roughly 7.38 billion ADA left. So we've depleted about half of the reserves so far. We also have the amount of rewards that are going out per epoch. And then we can see how much is being deposited per epoch into the Cardano Treasury. So as it currently stands, we're getting roughly 4.9 million ADA being deposited into the Cardano treasury every 5 days. Now, the amount of fees being generated is very, very minute compared to the amount that's coming in mainly from the ADA reserves, which is roughly around 75 to 76 ADA for fees per epoch. Again, keep in mind that that is totally dependent on network activity. So if we have a huge spike of network activity, we could expect that we may get an epoch or two where, we have more fees coming in, but it's not necessarily sustainable yet. So understanding that, let's jump into the actual proposal here, which is to decrease that treasury tax amount from 20% to 10%, meaning that 90% instead of 80% of the quote unquote pot, that virtual pot that we looked at, will now be going to stakers and SPOs. Now, this was submitted back on the 13th of February, with the voting deadline coming up on the 15th of March. And as it currently stands, we have Emergo, who has already chosen to abstain out of this particular vote or out of this particular proposal. And so the ICC, or the Constitutional Committee, their job is to make sure that Cardano governance actions are abiding by the Constitution. And so the fact that Emergo is choosing to abstain is an interesting choice, but they basically don't want to get their hands dirty, or they don't want to make any sort of decision as to whether or not this is constitutional. Now, we've yet to hear from anybody else. I'm interested to see exactly how Intersect responds, of course, IOG, and then the Cardano Foundation. Now, we are also expecting for DREPs to vote for this particular governance action, where we need 67% in terms of a buy-in for this to be ratified or confirmed. So this is interesting. So let's dive a little bit deeper into the actual text here, where it states that this particular governance proposal seeks to reduce the treasury cut from 20% to 10% to enhance staking incentives and rewards, while also improving decentralization, all while aligning with the economic sustainability of the Cardano ecosystem's long-term growth. Now, the adjustment aims to optimize staking rewards without compromising the financial health of the Cardano treasury, ensuring a balanced economic model that incentivizes participation in network activity. In my personal opinion, with the 1.6 billion ADA that we currently have, there's definitely enough ADA to go around in terms of the treasury, as long as we don't deplete too much ADA. And just looking at the annual budget that we have proposed so far, it's aiming to take somewhere around 255 million ADA out of the 1.68 billion ADA. So if I do a little bit of math here, let me see if I can get my calculator pulled up. We're going to take the 1.68 billion, and if we minus the 255 million, that leaves us with roughly 1.42 billion ADA. And that is roughly around, let's see here, 15% of the entire treasury that we're aiming to spend in 1 year. So let me know what you guys think about that. Does it make sense for us to spend 15% of what we're currently managing within the treasury? But then also keep in mind, right now at the current pace that we're at, if we have 365 days in a year, and if we have an epoch, which is 5 days, that gives us 73 epochs in a year. And at the current rate, with 4.97, or let's just round it up to 5 million ADA coming in every epoch, that's 365 million ADA coming in. So again, just to recap, we're looking to spend roughly 15% of the existing budget or the existing treasury for Cardano for the year. And we're currently adding 365 million ADA per year at the current rate that we're at. And we're looking to spend around 255 million ADA for this particular year of 2025. So we're taking out less than we're putting in, which means that we're still in a net positive position. Now, if we jump back into the proposal, that's where things could potentially change. So in terms of the motivation, it states the initial 20% in terms of what goes into the Treasury tax was set arbitrarily at the launch of Shelley, and that value has never been reassessed. Again, that's what I broke down here earlier, right? Which again, it states that following discussions and deliberations, that value was set at a fixed rate of 20%. So this is the value that they want to change from 20% back down to 10%. Now it states that with Cardano's ecosystem maturing and a more structured governance framework in place, it's now possible to refine the economic parameters to better align with network incentives. Now, I don't think that any ADA staker or delegator or SPO will complain about this particular update, because that means more ADA going back to them. Now, in closing, it states that a lower treasury cut increases staking rewards, which encourages broader network participation, which then also strengthens security while maintaining a sustainable treasury. This particular adjustment ensures that governance decisions support the long-term growth of the ecosystem. Now they break down and they provide some more rationale, which I'm going to briefly skip over. But a couple of key pieces that I want to highlight before we wrap up today's update include the fact that in a hypothetical example, if we assume that Cardano staking rewards currently provides an APY of 4%, with this particular governance action taking effect, that would increase the APY to roughly 4.5%. Now, just looking across the board, Cardano staking rewards has been on the decline. Of course, again, given what I've already talked about, with the reserves depleting and that shift from the staking rewards coming from the reserves gradually over time to the transaction fees and network usage. Right now, the ROS for Cardano stake pools is roughly around 2.6 to 2.7%. Now, when I started creating content, Cardano stake pools were paying out on a good day somewhere around an ROS of 4%. And even before that, they were paying out even more in terms of a reward, depending on how much you were staking. So over time, we've seen staking rewards beginning to shrink. And this is a mechanism or a proposal to reverse that a little bit, given what we know now and how the Treasury has actually been growing. And hopefully with better management, it will continue to be sustainable. Now, as we get ready to wind things down, it states that the new constitution explicitly permits Treasury cuts between 10 and 30%. If you've missed it, I just released a video breaking down the fact that we now have the official on-chain ratification of the interim constitution to be converted to the official Cardano constitution, which should be taking place, I believe it's the 23rd of February. So check that video out. It breaks down the fact that we now have an official Cardano constitution. And within the constitution, there's a guideline that states that we can have that treasury cut anywhere between 10 to 30%. So in this case, we're aiming to reduce that cut in order to provide the treasury with less, as opposed to bumping it up to 30, which would enhance the growth of the treasury, but then reduce the amount of staking rewards going out to delegators. Now, looking here, it states that rather than relying on direct comparisons to external blockchains for staking rewards, the focus should be on positioning Cardano as a highly competitive ecosystem that maximizes staking incentives and treasury efficiency, ensuring an optimal balance between treasury funding and staking rewards, which will attract users and developers long-term, particularly during the most competitive phases of the market cycles, reinforcing Cardano's long-term adoption and growth. Now I've got these last two sections here, and then I want to talk a little bit about who's voted so far. But it states that at a higher ADA valuation, the Treasury reserves will remain sufficient enough to fund governance, development, and long-term initiatives without over-relying on a higher tax rate. Again, with the annual budget for 2025 alone, we're pulling about 15% of the total amount of the current Treasury value. Now, this strikes a balance between incentivizing participation and ensuring Treasury sustainability. The last piece reads, reducing the Treasury cut increases direct staking incentives, which strengthens security by encouraging wider participation in staking, therefore reducing centralization risks amongst stake pools. So having said that, hopefully you guys are able to keep up with me here. I'll leave the link to the actual proposal down below. We have a total amount of 8% so far of the DREPs in the ecosystem behind this particular proposal. Let me know down below, do you agree with this particular proposal? Should we prioritize rewarding ADA stakers and delegators and SPOs over continuing to fund the Treasury at the current rate that we're funding it at? Do you think maybe we should be going in the opposite direction, adding even more funds to the Treasury while taking away a little bit from the staking rewards? So again, I think it's a balance here, but we've seen that the Cardano reserves have actually been depleting at a much slower rate than initially anticipated, meaning that we're actually doing relatively well. Now, should some of those rewards or should some of that additional amount in the reserves be given back over to stakers? Let me know what you guys think down below. But I want to take the opportunity to briefly review this brand new proposal because I think it's an important one. And of course, as a stake pool operator, I'm going to be able to benefit. But then anybody else who has ADA, right, which it's relatively simple to go ahead and delegate to a stake pool, consider delegating with Dapp, to go ahead and do so, they're also going to be rewarded and earning a little bit more by doing so and by supporting decentralization and by making sure that the Cardano network is forever secure. So that'll bring me to the end here for today's video. Let me know what you guys think down below, but I want to take the opportunity to briefly break this down. As always, if you found this to be helpful, I would appreciate you if you could smash that thumbs up. If you want more content just like this, diving into the technicals, educating on Cardano, make sure to go ahead and subscribe to the channel. And if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to leave a comment down below. That said, and as always, I'll see you guys in the next video.